Today, we're diving into one of the most haunting events of the 20th century, the Jonestown Massacre. And we're going beyond just the headlines, exploring this tragedy through a collection of first-hand accounts, legal documents, and historical analysis.
What's captivating about these sources is their multifaceted nature. We can sort of analyze the social and psychological currents of the time, but also grapple with the deeply personal stories of faith, disillusionment, and, unimaginable loss.
We're focusing on the experience of John Moore, a father desperately seeking answers about his daughters, Carolyn Layton and Annie Moore, who were in Jonestown.
Moore's perspective is so valuable because it's raw and immediate. He's not a historian, analyzing events from a distance. His writings reveal the brutal impact of receiving that news, the frantic search for information, and the agonizing wait that followed.
Yeah, his journal entries from those early days are incredibly powerful. He writes, "Being here is like being in the Twilight Zone. Imagine trying to reconcile the daughters you knew, the lives they led, with the horrific reality of Jonestown."
And the initial information was a chaotic mix of fact and rumor. The Moores were told there might be survivors, people who had escaped into the jungle. They clung to the hope that Carolyn and Annie were among them, maybe even actively resisting what was happening.
There's this one detail that speaks to the depth of their hope, even in the face of unimaginable horror. The family speculating about Carolyn and Annie escaping through jungle paths, embarking on a 2-day trek to Venezuela. It's a testament to the human spirit's ability to hold on to hope, even when facing the bleakest of realities.
This hope was intertwined with a growing frustration. The government's reluctance to perform autopsies, the lack of transparency, it felt like something was being hidden. John Moore's relentless pursuit of answers, his fight for the truth, becomes a central theme in his story.
And it's through this pursuit that a particularly jarring detail emerges. The Moores discover that Annie wasn't poisoned like many others. She was shot. This discovery shattered their initial understanding, forcing them to grapple with a new set of possibilities. Did she resist? Was she trying to escape?
It underscores just how much we don't know about what happened at Jonestown. This seemingly insignificant detail highlights the contradictions between the official narrative, the media's portrayal, and the lived experiences of those who were there.
To truly understand how this idyllic community descended into such horror, we need to go back to the beginning. People's Temple didn't start in Jonestown. It had a complex and at times even admirable history, originating in Indiana with a very different focus.
Jim Jones's early work was rooted in social justice, advocating for racial integration and serving the underprivileged. He even had ties to the Disciples of Christ denomination. People's Temple, in its early days, attracted individuals yearning for a community that championed acceptance and social action.
It's fascinating because even John Moore, years later, wrote about the positive aspects of the Temple's early work, praising their dedication to their members and their commitment to serving the disadvantaged. He saw it as a model for other churches.
However, as the temple expanded, so would Jones's control over his followers. The move to California, specifically to San Francisco, saw the temple evolve into a powerful political force. This rise in influence coincided with a noticeable shift toward tighter control and a more centralized power structure.
Even John Moore, initially a supporter, began to see cracks in the facade. His writings hint at a growing unease, the escalating demands for money, the public confessions that felt increasingly coerced, and the disturbing presence of physical punishments within the community. He referred to it as Spartan regimentation, a chilling foreshadowing of what was to come.
Those confessions are especially intriguing. Some were utterly outlandish, with individuals confessing to unimaginable acts like assassinating President Kennedy. Were these confessions genuine expressions of guilt, or were they the product of manipulation, fear, or psychological pressure? This question speaks to the insidious nature of Jones' control.
And then there's Jones himself. His own words paint a disturbing picture. He once proclaimed, "The last orgasm I'd like to have is death, if I could take you all with me." This chilling statement, combined with the growing isolation of the community, creates a sense of impending doom.
Jonestown was presented to the outside world as a utopia, a sanctuary from societal ills, a chance to build a self-sufficient community free from the perceived corruption of the outside world. But was it a genuine attempt at building a better world, or was it a calculated means of consolidating power and control?
John Moore's visit to Jonestown, though years before the tragedy, offers a glimpse into this complex reality. He recounts seeing an elderly woman tending her garden, painting an idyllic image of peaceful communal living. But there are also subtle hints of unease, the lack of privacy, the constant presence of loudspeakers broadcasting Jones's messages. It's a jarring juxtaposition.
This contrast between the utopian ideal and the creeping reality of control and paranoia is what makes Jonestown such a captivating, albeit tragic, case study in human behavior. Even John Moore, someone who initially supported the temple, couldn't ignore these growing contradictions. So how did this community, initially founded on principles of social justice and equality, spiral into such unimaginable horror?
And Jones, he was really a master at exploiting that fear, always warning of these external threats, these conspiracies against them, even saying the CIA was out to get them. When you're constantly being fed that fear and you're in an environment where Jones is the ultimate authority, it's tragic, but you can see how it happened.
Absolutely. And anyone who dared to question him, to disagree, they face the consequences. Shunning, humiliation, even violence. There are reports of people being drugged to keep them in line. It was a system designed to completely crush any form of dissent.
It's chilling. You know, John Moore even mentions this thing called the blue-eyed monster. It was this rumored electroshock treatment they supposedly used on kids who misbehaved. We don't know for sure if it was real, but the fact that the rumor existed at all, that people believed it, that says a lot about the atmosphere in Jonestown.
Right. Exactly. But what's so interesting is how Jones was able to maintain this facade for the outside world. Visitors, even John Moore during his visit, they saw what they thought was a utopia. People working together, this self-sufficient community. But it was all carefully staged.
It's true, like a carefully directed performance. Jones knew the power of image, of showing the world what they wanted to see while tightening his grip behind the scenes.
And then this facade starts to crumble as family members on the outside, people who had left or had loved ones still there, they start to organize. This group, they call themselves the concerned relatives, and they were willing to speak out.
The concerned relatives were really the ones who started raising the alarm. They were talking about the temple's finances, Jones's increasingly erratic behavior, even alleging human rights abuses. They were really picking apart Jones's carefully crafted image.
And they didn't just talk, they took action. They filed lawsuits, most notably in the case of John Victor Stone, a child Jones claimed as his own. This custody battle became huge news, putting the temple under a spotlight and really escalating the tension with the outside world.
Which leads us to Congressman Leo Ryan. He decided to go to Jonestown himself in November 1978 to see what was going on. It's important to remember, though, that Ryan wasn't going there with an agenda. He wanted to hear from Jones to get his side of the story, to give him a chance to respond to the allegations.
Right. And initially, Ryan even seemed, impressed by certain aspects of Jonestown. He saw the work they were doing, the community they built. He wasn't just there to condemn them.
But then everything changed. Several temple members saw Ryan's visit as their chance to escape. They went to him, begging for help to leave. It was this very public display of defiance of people breaking away from Jones's authority, and it was something he couldn't just ignore.
And Jones, he was already so paranoid, so obsessed with control. He saw this as the ultimate betrayal. Everything he'd built, his entire belief system, was falling apart.
And it's fascinating because you have these totally different accounts of those final days leading up to the massacre. Debbie Blakey, who had managed to escape earlier, she described Jonestown as a prison camp, this place of fear and coercion. But at the same time, there were those who remained completely devoted to Jones who still believed in him right up until the very end.
Yeah, and it raises this question that no one has been able to answer definitively. Was it really a mass suicide? Or was it something else entirely? Were people forced, manipulated, driven to a point where they felt they had no other choice?
It's just heartbreaking. We have that audio recording, the death tape from those last moments, and you can hear the fear, the chaos, Jones urging his followers to drink that poison.
But even on that tape, you can hear other voices, people questioning what's happening, expressing their fear. It wasn't this uniform act of blind obedience.
To think about what those last moments must have been like. Parents giving the poison to their own children. It's almost impossible to comprehend. Over 900 people gone. So many of them children. It's a tragedy that we're still trying to understand.
And in the aftermath, the world was left with this huge, horrific question. How? How could something like this happen? Was it the work of a madman, a cult leader with this almost supernatural power over people? Or was it something bigger, something about society, about human nature itself?
It's easy to think about Jonestown as this thing of the past, this isolated incident, but it really isn't. It left this unease behind, this question of how, that we're still grappling with.
And the investigations that followed, they were almost as complicated as Jonestown itself. Official inquiries, independent researchers, some people even thought the CIA might be involved somehow. It's a whole different time, the Cold War and all that.
Right, the context is important. Jones had talked about connections to communist countries, so some people saw Jonestown as this example of socialism gone wrong, while others thought maybe it was the government's fault, some secret experiment or something. It just shows you how differently people can see the same event.
Absolutely. And for the investigators, it was overwhelming. Trying to identify all the victims, figure out how each person died, and then trying to piece together what happened in that chaos. Hundreds of bodies in a remote jungle settlement.
And the death tape, as disturbing as it is, it only gives us a little piece of the puzzle. There's still so much we don't know. Like, was there really a plan to kill Jones's enemies? How much did the concerned relatives' actions contribute to what happened? And the biggest question of all, why did so many people choose to follow Jones, even to their deaths?
Yeah, those questions, they've led to so many books, documentaries, theories. Some focus on Jones himself, his personality, the way he could influence people. Others look at the people who were drawn to Jonestown, many of them from difficult backgrounds, looking for something to believe in.
And we can't forget about the world they were living in. The 70s were a time when people were disillusioned, searching for something different. Jones offered that, the promise of a better world, and he created a reality where his word was law.
It's a cautionary tale about power, about what happens when someone gains too much control and people stop thinking for themselves. It makes you wonder, are we vulnerable to that kind of manipulation too?
It really does. It makes you think, what can we do, not just as individuals, but as a society, to prevent something like Jonestown from happening again?
We have to understand how it happens. Educate ourselves about how charismatic leaders operate, how they take advantage of people's fears and desires. We need to encourage critical thinking, healthy skepticism, and open discussion, even when it's uncomfortable.
And I think most importantly, we need to remember the people, the individuals, the families whose lives were destroyed. Their stories are what matter most.
Absolutely. Jonestown is a dark part of history, but it holds important lessons about human nature, the dangers of unchecked power, and the importance of protecting our freedoms, our ability to think for ourselves.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Jonestown Massacre. We encourage you to learn more, to read the stories, to ask your own questions, because these are conversations that need to continue.